Because this is like the first MCU movie I can think of where I didn't watch the trailers. I just went into this movie like, I don't know jack shit about this. Let's just let it happen. Kind of felt good. The Eternals. Is it the Eternals? Oh, it's Eternals! Or Marvel Studios Eternals. There's no the. I'm just putting these where there shouldn't be these. Sorry. So Eternals is a new MCU movie. When I say I don't know jack shit about Eternals, not just talking about the movie, I don't know about Eternals the comic book either. We're officially in deep cut territory here. Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, Hawkeye, I knew them. Eternals? Not really. But the gist is the Eternals are these demigod-ish characters who are very old, who came to Earth and had absolutely no prime directive whatsoever. The Federation would not stand for it, but hey, different logistics. It was a different time. So they came to Earth, and because these demigods with super advanced technology came to Earth and interacted with humans, it shaped our civilizations, our culture, our mythology. Now they've been on Earth since then. It's now modern day, and a big bad thing is going to happen to Earth, and they have to stop it. And I had heard that this is a different kind of MCU movie. It doesn't really feel like an MCU movie. It does. I mean, it does. In the movie, I was thinking, okay, what would this movie feel like if it wasn't in the MCU? And the answer is very different. It's a very MCU-ified movie about immortals who inspired mythology, but still has that MCU DNA. Is that code for there's a super CGI beatdown in the end? Yeah. It is. It's kind of code for that. As for the cast was fine. The cast did a good job. None of the cast are here to sell tickets. But that kind of makes sense. There's a great video of Anthony Mackie floating around the internet where he talks about how people don't buy tickets to see Sylvester Stallone or Arnold Schwarzenegger anymore. It's not the actor who sells the ticket anymore. It's the characters who sell the ticket. And I think he's 100% right. I don't think a lot of audiences out there are going to be super attached to the characters in this movie, but still it's an MCU movie. And that's what sells the ticket here. But for the most part, Gemma Chan is the lead in this movie. She's the one that the movie rests on more than the rest of the team. I thought she did a good job. She's relatable. She has heart. I mean, by relatable, that is important. I like the fact that in the world as it pertains to the characters in this movie, we built mythology of gods around these characters, but these characters are as flawed and human as any humans. I've always liked that concept. I do enjoy the fact that the MCU took that on. In that it's a bit bittersweet. There's a part of me that's like, yeah, I'm glad that the MCU's telling that story. I'm glad that that story's on screen and it doesn't suck, you know? Not that that was really the same, but you know. On the other hand, there's the reality of the situation that does end up bumming me out, where it's like, this movie really couldn't happen. A movie like this, with this scope, couldn't happen if it wasn't attached to a property, probably more specifically the MCU. It's an MCU movie. Does it have the humor? Absolutely. For the humor, you have a couple characters that really bring it and bring it well. Kumail Nanjiani and Brian Tyree Henry, I thought they were great. Brian Tyree Henry was more subtle with his comedy, which I like. You don't see a lot of that in the MCU. Usually MCU comedy is comedy. I like the fact that he was more subtle. MCU, do more of that. But Kumail Nanjiani, I can't say he wasn't the funniest one in the movie. I can't say he didn't have me laughing. He did. It's actually him and his assistant, this butler, this guy who follows him around with a camera. I don't know. I thought it was hilarious. But as all recent MCU movies try to break free of their MCU isms, try to do something different, it does! Until it doesn't. That's where I say the movie had conflicting tone. I'm not even gonna be like, the movie was too long, though it probably could have been shorter. I'm not gonna say the movie was too boring, because actually, the slower moments were the more high concept moments that I appreciated they were taking on. Also, I really liked Dune, and that movie was way slower. So, how am I gonna come out of Dune and be like, it was awesome? Eternals? I mean, it is all about execution, but I did appreciate those moments where they tried to just put the fighting down, put the CGI down, and have a high concept moment, at least a thought exercise. Because that's how these Eternals would be. They're thousands of years old. They wouldn't see life like, oh, you know, 10 years ago, super long time. There's a hypothesis, a thought experiment thrown out in this movie. We're keeping it vague. I'm gonna keep it vague. I'm gonna throw you some red herrings so you don't deconstruct the plot based on what I say or don't say here. But it's a thought exercise I actually threw out to a friend once. He was like, you're crazy. Whatever. My friends and I will get together, we'll do thought exercises and ponder space, time, life itself. And he threw out the fact that one day we will have to go to another planet. We'll have to migrate or terraform. We will have to leave Earth. eventually. And what I proposed was, should we do that? You know, all right, we wrecked Earth's resources, we've drained Earth dry, now we have to go somewhere else. But think of this, humor this idea. Our going to this other planet will change the evolutionary trajectory of that other planet. Whatever sentient life form, civilization that would evolve on that planet naturally, now never will because of our presence there. An entire civilization that would have been on this planet will now never have the chance to be. An entire would-be history of a planet is completely altered and will now never happen because of our presence there. On the cosmic scale, do we have the right to make that call? You know, do we have the right to keep a civilization from happening because of our want to survive? And someone throws out a similar moral dilemma here. Basically, it's like, if a civilization, if a planet doesn't exist, is that every bit as bad as wiping out a civilization? I really liked when the movie tried to go there. It's like the movie was like, huh, they're falling asleep, quick. I don't know, have CGI dog monster things come on screen and fight them. Yeah, perfect. Then I was like, oh yeah, MCU movie. That's right. We're in an MCU movie. Not saying MCU's bad. It's not bad. I'm just saying. Then the end happened, and then super CGI beatdown, and that's right, MCU 101. It's the formula right there. It's just the same thing that happened with Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi injected this new energy into the MCU. I was digging it. It was awesome. It was practical, and then the end happened. I was like, that's right, CGI fight. This CGI fight's actually different enough. It's more different than Shang-Chi. It's not like, oh, good guy, bad guy, they fight. But the CGI stands out a lot in this movie. I think it's because Eternals, for the most part, is very pretty and very practical. So when it's very CGI heavy, CGI stands out like a motherfucker. When it was all going down at the end, I was like, is this the most expensive MCU movie, or is this the least expensive MCU movie? What's the budget on this? Because the CGI stood out in this movie more than it did a lot of other MCU movies. Or maybe I was just sitting there going, I feel like DC did this better. Maybe that's it. Olive branch here. Maybe it doesn't always feel like an MCU movie because sometimes it feels like a DC movie. I mean, you have the Superman character who flies, shoots lasers with his eyes. You have the Flash character. I definitely was like old Biff on a couple scenes. I was like,
something very familiar about all this.
Speaking of familiar and taken from stuff, there were a few scenes in here that I had seen in other MCU movies. Not just, oh, seen it in another movie before. I've seen this in the MCU before. Like, someone does the Loki trick. They do the Loki. Something happens in here where I was like, that's Loki's move, by the way. I've seen Loki do it, and you just did it. Again, it doesn't feel like that, oh, but it's all interconnected, and it's the same universe, and these are super old characters, and maybe they taught Loki how to do it. Rest assured, they're gonna say that that's the case. They're gonna say like, no, Loki learned that move from this character, like that kid in Iron Man 2 is Peter Parker. That's called a retcon. It's not just that one scene. There were a few scenes in here where I was like, I've seen that in the MCU before. Just felt very familiar. Like I said earlier in this video, it's like the movie feels different enough. It's like someone got freaked out and had to remind everyone like, oh yeah, it's an MCU movie, do some really MCU-ish things. But in the end, the movie was reliably entertaining, as generally speaking, the MCU is. It has a good message about humanity, having faith in people, what human beings are capable of, and how human beings at their worst isn't really what humanity has to offer. I appreciate stuff like that. The concept of Eternals is a lot more interesting than the execution of Eternals. I think this movie and what I saw could have been a masterpiece of sorts, especially among the MCU. But the movie seems so afraid to go its own direction and commit to its high concept that it kind of dabbles its toe into a couple times. It springs back to the MCU safe zone on more than a few occasions, and it leaves you going, all right, I was still entertained, no alcohol required, but this movie could have been so much more. All right, so Eternals, have you seen it? What did you think about it? I know it's a bit early, but eventually the movie will come out, and that question will no longer be too early to ask. But whatever you thought, comment below, let me know, and as always, if you like what you've seen here and you want to see more, click right here to see more.